Why is it that Republicans seem completely immune to the consequences of passing gun legislation?
After all, it was Republican Don Mulford who authored the bill that eliminated open carry in California, a bill that was praised by the Republican governor at the time, a man named Ronald Reagan, who praised the passage, saying that there's no reason civilized society needs weapons to have conversations. And look, we all know that both Mulford and Reagan were primarily motivated out of fear of the Black Panthers organizing and marching in California. But even after leaving the governor's office and becoming president of the United States, Reagan would become one of the most prominent politicians for gun control in U.S. history.
But despite the overwhelming evidence that shows that it's always Republican politicians that pass these bills that restrict gun rights,
the most vocal of the 2A adherents seem to only want to blame people like Bill Clinton, who, despite having very little to do with the Brady handgun bill or the semi-automatic weapons ban, is blamed completely for them. Or they blame people like Joe Biden, who in reality has done very little to pass any form of gun legislation while president.
And just as a side note, the only gun legislation bill that's been passed while Joe Biden has been president was written by this guy,
Florida Senator Marco Rubio, who authored the only piece of gun legislation that has been passed under Biden while still taking money from the NRA.
But enough of that segue. Let's look at the person that conservatives really thought was going to steal away gun rights.
The election of Barack Obama caused gun rights enthusiasts to have a collective meltdown and throw an 8-year-long temper tantrum. While he was president, the gun industry grew about 158%, going from about $19 billion a year to $50 billion a year.
And scholars overwhelmingly agree that the reason the gun industry grew so much is because Barack Obama represented a racialized threat to the status quo. The election of America's first black president really upset a lot of people, and there were really 3 entities driving these perceptions that Barack Obama was a threat to gun rights. First was the NRA, then there was a pastor, and then a man who would eventually become president.
Let's start with Obama's successor. Donald Trump was responsible for maintaining the birther argument, a false myth that Barack Obama couldn't be president because he was not a U.S. citizen, having been born in Kenya.
And these allegations led Barack Obama to release his birth certificate to the public. And his birth certificate highlighted the fact that he met both of the ways that a person could qualify to be a natural-born citizen. And for those who don't know, there are 2 ways that a person can qualify to be a natural-born citizen. The first is you have to be born on U.S. soil. So anyone who is born on U.S. soil, regardless of where their parents came from, is automatically a U.S. citizen. The second is one of your parents must be a U.S. citizen. So even if you're not born on U.S. soil, if you have at least one parent who is a U.S. citizen, you are a U.S. citizen. And Barack Obama met both of those, and you're only required to meet one. He was born in Hawaii, which last I checked is a state, and his mom is from Kansas. She was born there, thus she's a U.S. citizen. So he met both of the qualifications.
We also know it was racially motivated because at no point did Donald Trump accuse John McCain of not being qualified to be president, despite John McCain being born in Panama. And pastors like Rafael Cruz really ran with the birther argument and told their parishioners that they should buy firearms to help send Barack Obama back to Kenya. And fun fact for those who don't know, Rafael Cruz is the father of Texas Senator Ted Cruz. And the NRA really attached itself to these messages of the birther argument, as well as the evangelical messages that Barack Obama was the Antichrist. And so the NRA's message became that Barack Obama is not American, not Christian, and will be the most anti-gun president in U.S. history. But despite the fact that several high-profile mass shootings happened under his watch, such as Sandy Hook, the most that Barack Obama ever really did was hold press conferences where he begged gun owners and non-gun owners to come together to figure out common-sense solutions to stop gun violence in the U.S.
During his 8 years, Barack Obama didn't really push for gun legislation. And that's pretty typical, and you can make the argument that Democrats kind of avoid passing gun legislation because they know they're going to be the ones blamed for it. But Republicans know that they can pass whatever they want, and they're not going to be blamed or punished for doing so. And we really see this with the passage of the Brady handgun bill as well as the semi-automatic weapons ban. Despite the fact that Ronald Reagan was the driving force for both of those bills being passed, we blame Bill Clinton. But I know what you're thinking. Dr. Dowd-Arrow, it's been like 40 years since Reagan was president. Surely no other Republicans have been anti-gun. They've all been true conservatives and upholding the Second Amendment and not passing anything. It must be those despicable Democrats that are passing the laws that get passed, right?
Well, that brings us back to this guy. Remember him? The number of mass tragedy events greatly increased under his watch, and he saw several high-profile events such as
the event at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, as well as in Las Vegas. Let's start with the event in Parkland first and look at his response.
On February 22nd, 2018, a little over a week after Parkland, Trump held a bipartisan meeting with members of Congress and his Vice President, Mike Pence. And in that meeting, he chastised his Republican colleagues for being too afraid of the NRA to act on the issue of gun violence. And it was at this point that Mike Pence tried to keep Trump from biting the hand that feeds him and said, hey, we want to do something about this, but we want to make sure we don't infringe on people's rights. Trump's response? To hell with their rights. He asked Mike Pence, why should we give a damn about people's due process rights? He said that we should just take firearms from anyone we deem as dangerous and then let the courts sort it out later.
I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a very pro-2A argument.
And then there was the event that happened in Las Vegas. This event, which happened just a few months before Parkland, resulted in 60 people being unalived and over 800 people being injured. And because Congress refused to act, Donald Trump said, screw it, I'll just ban bump stocks by executive fiat. But despite the fact that he used executive action to attack gun rights, and he called for people to just have guns taken away from them willy-nilly without court processes, pro-gun enthusiasts view him as the living embodiment of America and its Constitution.
Which is a really weird take when we consider that
he was literally attacked by the very symbol of America.
So yeah, despite the fact that it's always Republicans who do the most to restrict gun rights in the United States, the most pro-gun individuals will turn a blind eye to all of that and instead point fingers at the Democrat because of the threat to their rights. Thoughts?